The unchurched Christian community is now as large as the churched community. And my experience has been that unchurched Christians very rarely are people who are moving forward in their faith. They're people who've not lost their faith. I wouldn't dare to say you can't be a Christian and be unchurched. But I tell you what, you might struggle to stay one, and you'll certainly struggle to grow as one. So we want to make sure that we're reaching out as best we can. We've talked about the fact that there are around 4,000 families moving into West Auckland every year. And that means even 10% of those are Christian families who we want to invite and say, hey, look, if you're looking for a church family to be part of, we are here. Even on the last prayer walk, it was fascinating that on 2 different occasions, different people spoke with those who'd recently moved to Auckland from Wellington. And we're open to the idea of coming to church. And so these are the sorts of contacts that we want to make. This is the reason we want to be a city on a hill. But we're very aware that evangelism, that is actively sharing your faith with the intention of persuading another person to follow Christ, is something that might be rather scary. So we've decided that the starting point is to say, how about just living out loud as a Christian? How about making sure that you're known to be a Christian? Debbie and I had a meal with some friends recently, and he is a Catholic believer, and he is a policeman. And he said to me one time that a Christian had joined their group and was getting quite a lot of heat for being a Christian, and my friend thought it would be good to defend him and said, I'm a Christian, and his colleagues said, no, you're not. I'm sorry, if your colleagues say, no, you're not, there is a problem. But one of the problems was he wasn't known to be a Christian. This was new information to his colleagues. He wasn't publicly a Christian, he was privately one. The kingdom of God is a public matter. If you're going to see a movie, see this one. This is Hacksaw Ridge. What an incredible movie. If you're a bit squeamish though, don't go. It is gruesome. Mel Gibson is the director, and he's made a point of conveying just how gruesome Second World War, any war is, but this is the Second World War. And there are some pretty gruesome scenes. The man on the screen is the character, at least Desmond Doss. This is a real-life story. So Desmond Doss, a Seventh-day Adventist, so he would have been right at home in this building, in World War II, said he couldn't, with any good conscience, watch his friends go to war and defend their country and him stay at home. But equally, he couldn't, with good conscience, pick up a gun, because he believed, as a follower of Jesus, that it was not appropriate. It was not part of his pacifist position. So he described himself not as a conscientious objector, but a conscientious cooperator. And he said, I want to become a medic. And they wouldn't let him. And they called him all kinds of names. They said he was just a coward. Why a coward would be enlisting is beyond me. And they actively opposed him getting in. And finally, he managed to be appointed as a medic. He went to Japan, where the mission he was part of was to take a bit of ground called Hacksaw Ridge. Hacksaw Ridge required the soldiers to climb a 400-foot tall rope netting to get onto the ridge to fight. And when they got up there, they found out that the Japanese had the area incredibly well defended. It was a really tough ask to take Hacksaw Ridge. And at one point, the signal is given to the American troops to retreat, and they dive down their rope netting to escape. But not Desmond Doss. Desmond Doss realizes that there are injured men on the battlefield. And so he decides that he is going to rescue as many of them as he possibly can. So one at a time, he finds injured soldiers and he carried them on his shoulders to the edge. Now that he's got this problem, you've got a 400-foot drop and you've got a man who's just had his legs blown off. And so he created a little pulley system, and he would lower the man down using his body weight as the counterweight. He would lower them down. 75 men he rescued. Can you imagine the rope burns on his hands, lowering 75 men down 400 feet at a time? And in the movie, rather beautifully, he'll lie there exhausted at the end of having saved one man, and he'll say, Lord, just help me get one more. Just help me get one more. His faith really did impact the group. There's a lovely scene at the end of the movie where the soldiers refuse to climb the rope fence again until he has prayed for them and prayed for the platoon. But actually the most important thing, or the special moment for me in the movie, was that there were a couple of characters like the sergeant and one of the higher up who came and said, you know what? Normally I'm a good read of people, but I've got you entirely wrong. You're not a coward. In fact, you may be one of the bravest men I've ever met. And I was really touched by this because this characteristic was now attached to his faith. You see, at the beginning, when he was out loud about being a Christian was being a coward. But now being a Christian was about being courageous. Now, he didn't do a lot in the movie, and I'm not sure he did a lot in real life to actively try and persuade anyone to follow Jesus. But I tell you what, he was a man of great influence. He got the Congressional Medal of Honor for saving 75 men, and he never picked up a gun. But he did decide that he'd have to live his faith out loud. He'd have to be known as a Christian to everybody who knew him. And that's my simple challenge as we start today. Does everybody who knows you know that you're a follower of Jesus? Or is that still news to some of the people in your world? Because if it's news, you better write a press release and you better let them know the news. Because you can't even get to evangelism if you haven't even begun to live out loud as a follower of Jesus. The second point that we talked about last week, that Debbie did a great job of covering, was the idea that it will take a village. Because the second part of our statement was that we want to build people into community. One of my absolute favorite verses of the Bible that for me applies to harvest in a big way is that God puts the lonely in families. That the community of faith is to be a family to belong to. And that we have such lonely people in our world, working beside us, living beside us. There are lonely people all around us. Mother Teresa said that it was loneliness was the leprosy of the modern age. There are lots of people who just aren't really deeply connected to other human beings anymore. And we want to connect people. Now that's important because oftentimes the church will arrange itself so that people attach to the organization. So it's all about coming to events, all about coming to programs. And events are helpful, but only as a way of facilitating relationships. Yesterday, I spent the morning with Emily having to go down to the Emporium to find things that would allow her to dress up as the Mad Hatter for the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. If you haven't seen a photo of her, the one on Facebook does it proud. She did a great job of becoming the Mad Hatter, and a few other people I see as well dressed up rather fantastically for the Mad Hatter Tea Party. Who won, by the way? Who got best dressed? Jasmine got best dressed. There you go. It's a great opportunity, an event like that, to make relationships. It's a great opportunity to begin to connect, but in and of itself, it won't do it. If you only ever went to church events, you wouldn't attach very strongly to people. We become a community when we start sharing our lives together, and what a difference it makes. The next photo is full of our dear friends at the back there on the sound desk. 2010, at the church camp, apparently David played the part of Jungle Jim at the park, at the camp there. And then I think one of our very first Passover Seders that at least Sue was part of, there they are dancing to the track or to the song Dai Dayenu. And when Sue and Dave first came to Harvest, it was interesting that the community, in a sense, was the one that discipled Sue and Dave. In fact, it was remarkable how God had arranged it. After Sue and Dave visited, when we were meeting at Swanson, it turned out very quickly that Sue had a connection with Alistair, who was working down at the Manor store. And then it wasn't long, you see, Sue did something really brave that activated it. She came to our Bible study on a Wednesday night. For many years, we had a Bible study called Jam, Jesus and Me. And Sue rocked up. She'd been to church once on a Sunday. And for Sue, really that was kind of among the very first church meetings she'd ever been to, and then turned up at our house on the Wednesday night. Oh, and then, Sue, have I ever told you how I very cleverly placed you in the right group on that night? We were studying the Gospel of John, and we were about to look at a passage that talks about the resurrection. And I just scanned the room, and I'd only met Sue the week before, but I'd kind of worked out that Sue was a bright lady who appreciated educated people. And so when we broke off into two groups, I very strategically siphoned off a whole lot of the university-educated people into one group and asked Sue to join that group. And then I asked that group to explain to Sue why they, educated people, because you see, sometimes people will have their little kind of, oh, well, you know, maybe to believe the resurrection you have to be a bit dim, you know. So how would she explain educated people believing? So I said to this group, explain why you believe the resurrection is an actual historical event and not just a myth. Because that's what it could be a myth. And those stories then got relayed to Sue, and I watched Sue's eyes widen as she realized, oh, these people, they believe that Jesus rose from the grave. Holy moly. And then Sue and David became friends with Cam and Mars. And then Cam and Mars started to spend some time with them socially and also for the purpose of beginning to teach them about the faith. I remember Sue came up to me a few weeks later at Jam, and she said, "What do I do? I think I'm starting to believe." Don't you like that? I'm starting to believe. And so we talked about what it would really mean to make Jesus Lord, to really surrender wholeheartedly to him. That Sunday, very rarely for us to have an altar call at church, but maybe we had a guest speaker, I can't remember. We had some kind of altar call, which is for a salvation, and so Sue toddled forward. I think Dave was thinking, what on earth's going on here? But you see, Dave started to come to Jam as well, even though all along he was saying, hey, I'm just here to support Sue. This is something Sue likes, and that's fine by me, and, you know, seems to be good. But Sue was sort of traveling at a very different pace spiritually to David. And then Sue got baptized. We had this particular baptism service down at the Westwave pool. Sue is baptism 100 of the Harvest Journey. I think we should have got her a t-shirt made. We never did. We threatened to. And I remember afterwards, it was fascinating that David came up to me and said, you know what, I don't think it'll be too long before I'm in the water. And as he said it, I immediately understood something in my spirit. I kind of imagined that, you know, up until that point, David and Sue would be kind of walking along one side of the riverbank, and the church was on the other side of the riverbank. And it was kind of like the day that Sue got baptized, she went down into the river, got baptized, and then came up on the other side of the riverbank. Now she was one of the believers. Now she was in the community of faith. And I kind of saw Dave standing over there going, hey, hold on. I don't want to be on this side of the riverbank. I want to be on that side. And Dave came to Jam. And you see, previously Sue had said to me, you need to stop harassing Dave about becoming a Christian. You need to stop asking him so often. Because, see, I'm completely unashamed about asking people where they're at and asking them to make a decision. And for the record, my go-to question is this one when if you're in my home. I'll say, is there a reason why you shouldn't give your life to Christ before you leave my house today? Because I figured that's a good question. Because either the answer is no, so let's get down to business, or the answer is yes, there is a reason, then we'll deal with it. On another occasion, a man did actually say yes, and I said, what's the problem? He said, oh, well, there's this thing inside of me that won't let me come to Jesus. And I said, I'll tell you what, let me pray, and I promise you, whatever's inside of you that won't let you come to Jesus, it'll lose its power pretty fast. And so we prayed for just a minute, and then I stopped and I said, how about now? He said, yep, I can do it now. Anyway, I'd used this line on David previously, and it hadn't kind of sealed the deal, but I was just sitting there, and I felt the Holy Spirit say, you ask him again. I don't care what Sue thinks, you ask him again. So I said, so Dave, I think I was more gentle this time. I said, what's going on? And then he says, oh, I've got this story to tell. I haven't even told Sue. And he said, I was putting out the washing, and I said, God, if you're real, I really need to know. Something like that, right? Prove yourself to me kind of prayer. Next thing, knock at the door. Hi, we've come to tell you about the Word of God, said the two people at the front step. To which Dave replies most preciously, it's okay, I'm going to harvest. We've got it covered. Thanks for coming. And shuts the door. And so then I trot out my line, is there any reason why you shouldn't give your life to Christ before you leave my house? He said, none that I can think of. And so right there, Sue and the rest of us helped bring David into a living relationship with Jesus. It took a village. It wasn't about one person. It took a village. And it takes a village to make a disciple. It takes a village to replicate the DNA of the kingdom inside, because it's a together issue. Together with all the saints, we discern how deep, how wide, how high is the love of Christ that surpasses all understanding. Together with all the saints, it's a together issue. This microphone's not my friend, is it? All right. Oh, you reckon I'm doing it? I might be earthing it in some way, you think? On the orange part, still doing it. Oh. Anybody remember having like an aerial to their TV where you get someone to say, just point it over there, all right, now stop. Now, if you just stand like that for the next 60 minutes, we can watch the A-Team. Brilliant. All right. Number 3 in the strategy statement, equipping the saints for ministry. Of course, the verse that instructs us in this comes from Ephesians 4. And he himself gave some to be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers for the equipping of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the building up of the body of Christ. Okay, normally at Harvest we'll teach you a Hebrew word. Today, though, you're going to learn a Greek one. The Greek word for equipping is Kartatismos. Kartatismos. Can you say that? Kartatismos. And it means to mend, to repair, to make whole or perfect, like the setting of bones, to make something completely adequate or sufficient for something. Kartatismos. We get our word artisan from this word in English. We get the word artisan from Kartatismos. Equipping isn't about surveys, spiritual gift surveys. It isn't about courses and programs. It's about restoration. It's about mending. It's about being made right for the purpose for which you were created. When I first got saved, I immediately had this kind of dawning awakening of this in my life. You see, one of the things that I'd struggled with in the weeks and months leading up to my salvation, working as a morning pirate on Radio Hauraki, was I used to think to myself, let me get this right. All of this communication ability in me, and the only thing I've got to say is that Aerosmith is next, that Led Zeppelin is after the break. I did not feel like this communication gift had found its home, had found its purpose. But in faith, immediately realized why God had made me a communicator, why God had given me this ability. And suddenly, it was like the light went on. I went to Rima, as it happens, and I said, look, I'm a broadcaster. I promise to not take any other job offers until you are ready to employ me. I remember the guy who was the head programmer at that point would go on to become the CEO, John Fabrin, said, can I pray with you before you go? He's just meeting me for the first time. I've been a Christian for all of about 3 weeks, so as far as I've figured, when someone has said, could they pray, you put your hands in the air. So I was sitting there, I put my hands in the air, and I look up, and I can see that he is absolutely weeping. And to this day, John would say that praying with me in that moment was one of the most sort of powerful moments of the presence of God that he'd experienced during his work life at Rima. But very wisely, he said, no, well, we won't employ you quite yet. We'll have to make sure that this newfound faith of yours sticks. Not working. Is it irritating anybody else? Because it's sure irritating me. Let's mute that. Praise the Lord. Okay. I did actually get other job offers in the intervening months. It took about 6 months before they were willing to employ me. And I turned them down as I promised I would. Because of this equipping, mending, Kartatismos process. You see, coming to faith had begun something inside of me. I was being restored. It was as if I had found the way in which to express who I was and why I'd been made. It's funny to me now that one of my favorite TV programs are these restoration type programs. There's one I particularly enjoy called American Restoration, but my current favorite actually is a Canadian one, which is called Buy It, Fix It, Sell It, which is not kind of, strictly speaking, restoration, but I still like the idea in that there's 3 different artisans, really, who will buy things and then turn them into something new and amazing. Like last week I enjoyed one of them bought a desk and then he turned it into a fold-out bed. I just like that. I like that idea to be able to see something that nobody else could see. When at the auctions, they could see the potential. Church is meant to be like that. Church is meant to be a community of restoration, a community where we were becoming whole, Kartatismos, we were being mended. Let's take a look at some other verses in the Bible that use Kartatismos to show you how wide the idea goes. Matthew 4. Going on from there, Jesus saw 2 other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, in the boat with Zebedee, their father, mending, Kartatismos, mending their nets, mending. Christian community is about wholeness, about mending. It's about the work we do to each other to prepare ourselves for work. That net is useless until it's been mended. It cannot catch fish. Kartatismos. How about this? 2 Corinthians. Finally, brothers and sisters, rejoice, strive for full restoration. Kartatismos. Encourage one another. Be of peace. Be of one mind. Live in peace, and the God of love and peace will be with you. 1 Thessalonians. Night and day, praying exceedingly that we might see your face and might perfect, Kartatismos, that which is lacking in your faith. You see, oftentimes in church, we just limit it down to the jolly roster, don't we? Equipping the saints usually means, where do you fit on the roster? Can you be a greeter? Can you work on the sound desk? Maybe hospitality? Maybe on the worship team? We just want to put you on a roster. But Kartatismos is a much deeper idea. It's about the perfecting. It's about the mending. It's about the healing of broken people so that they can finally be of use to God and be all that they were made to be. And the beautiful thing about the way God has arranged it is that when you and I engage in the equipping of the saints, it's good for us as well. Romans 1, Paul says, I long to see you that I may impart to you some spiritual gift to make you strong, that you and I may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith. See, God's arranged it so that when you become active, involved in mending others, you find yourself getting healed at the same time. You find yourself being blessed by being a blessing. You find yourself being refreshed by doing some refreshing. God has arranged it so that the giver is never overtaken by the receiver. For it's more blessed to give than to receive, Jesus said. More blessed, more happy, more fulfilling, more satisfying. Oh, the city on a hill is a different kind of city. It's a place where broken people come and they find a home, they find a community, and then the mending begins, and then the healing begins. Well, how do we do it? Well, I love that the Bible answers these questions. 1 Peter 4, verse 10 and 11. As each one has received a gift, employed in serving one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. Now here's the two ways we do it. Whoever speaks, let him speak as it were the utterances of God. Whoever serves, let him do as by the strength which God supplies. Which are you, a speaker or a server? Because it'll be one of those. And how important it is to find our place in either. And to realize if you're a speaker, if you're someone who teaches truths, conveys wisdom, offers support through what you say, listen to the admonition. Speak as it were the utterances of God. You see, you can't go mending people in your own strength, with your own wisdom, with your own words. You've got to find something from heaven for people. You've got to be able to say something that didn't originate in you, that came from this incredible connection that you've been cultivating with Jesus. Those are the kinds of words that heal. Those are the kinds of words. I'm amazed often in the counseling environment how I bump into it. I didn't even know I'm doing it. I was providing supervision for a pastor, and I simply made this comment to her. I said, now look, if you have lunch with someone from the church, and it's like a pastoral contact, you make sure you have a lunch hour following. She burst into tears. I said, why are you crying about that? She says, it's been 7 years since I had a lunch break. You see, when you're committed to speaking the utterances of God, you might not even know when God uses you. You might not even know. But sometimes you do. Some of you will have seen on Facebook this week how deeply encouraged I was to have a man who had only met once before, for the first and only time 4 years ago, contact me during the week. Emails me, says, you probably don't remember me, and he was right. So I Facebook stalked him to find out which one he was. I typed in his name and his photo came up. He said, I've got a word for you. And of course, my instinct, I confess, was pretty bad. My instinct was crackpot, crazy. And then I stopped and I said, Lord, what do you reckon? He said, I want you to speak to him. Ah, okay. So I said, okay, fine, you come into work and share your word. Well, friends, his word was like reading my mail. I could not believe, he could not possibly have known the things he was addressing in his word. He didn't know a thing about really me and my life, but the message that he came to give was such a powerful encouragement to me. He was speaking the utterances of God. Now, sometimes they're like that, but other times they're just like the one I did, where you don't even know you're doing it, but you realize God is speaking through you. Well, guess what? God can't speak through you unless you start opening your mouth to other people in the church, going out of your way to be an encouragement, out of your way to be a teacher. There are no accidental encouragers. There are no accidental ministries. There are intentional ones where you decide, you know what? I'm going to be an encouragement. But what about the other side? Whoever serves, let him do so as by the strength which God supplies. You see, similarly, don't you love this? Things that seem to come so naturally to us, talking and doing, in both instances, God says, no. If it's going to be part of Kartatismos, if it's going to be part of the mending, it can't be you, it has to be me. So finding that place in your heart where the strength, where the motivation for serving another is coming from the Lord, that's what mends. Now, all around us are opportunities to do that. Debbie has been conscious of, Bridget's been really struggling with the morning sickness. She says it's public knowledge now because you can't keep that a secret. Congratulations, by the way, Jason. We're so happy for you. Yes, just a little clap. But morning sickness, apparently doesn't just come in the morning, huh? Should be called all day for several months sickness, has really been a struggle for Bridget. And so Debbie, on a couple of occasions, has gone and shared a meal, taken a meal for the family. Kartatismos, mending through serving. No special words. I was the delivery boy one time. I stood at the doorstep and I could see that Bridget was in no place to be talked to. She was feeling crook, but she was grateful to receive a bit of love. Grateful to know that she was part of a community, even though she's not able to participate at the moment because she's not feeling well. Serving strengthens. Serving mends just like speaking does, so let's not favor one over the other. But here's the thing I really want us to understand today, and this is the reason why so many of us need, I think, to be encouraged to stay the course, is the story of Chinese bamboo. If you're going to grow some Chinese bamboo, you plant the seed in year 1 and you water the seed, and guess what happens in year 1? Nothing. It don't grow at all. And so if you're patient, you continue watering in year 2. And guess what happens during year 2? Nothing. Now you've spent 2 years and nothing's happened. Year 3, you keep watering. And guess what happens in year 3? Nothing. And you're thinking to yourself, honestly, this is a waste of time. Year 4. You tell yourself, well, 1 more year, and you water, and guess what happens in year 4? Nothing. And then you decide that you must be a bit loopy to be doing this. 4 years you've been watering now, and nothing has grown yet. But at some point in year 5, all that you have done over the previous 4 and something years comes to fruition, and in 6 weeks, it grows 90 feet. 90 feet in 6 weeks, but it only happens in year 5. Kartatismos takes time. Kartatismos is a long-range project. Kartatismos is not looking for instant gratification, not looking to see that my little bit of service here or my encouraging word there has suddenly turned everything around. It is realizing that we are going to water and water and water and water and water and water, and then we're going to water some more, and then we're going to water and water and water and water, and you're thinking, you know what, I'm sick of being on that ministry team, I'm out. And you stop watering. And water and water and water and water and water. But this year, we've seen some bamboo here at Harvest. This year, we've seen some people who have grown tall in a very short amount of time. I reckon I watched about 30 feet of growth in Teresa one night earlier in the year at the women's retreat. I reckon there was just enough water going on there that years of watering suddenly caused this woman to sprout. I've been watching some bamboo around here recently. Maybe you're thinking, well, I haven't grown, I haven't changed, I haven't developed. Keep watering, keep getting in the place where you get watered. And then suddenly, you will begin to grow. finally, I thought it was going to be a harder thing to talk about, the church planting part of our vision. You see, if this healing city exists, this city on a hill, this city that is a beacon to unchurched people, this city that gathers the lonely up and starts to love on them and incorporate them into community, this city of Kartatismos, where everybody here is like an artisan, working on creating masterpieces with the people around you, then when that begins to take flight, something else begins to happen. New life emerges. Now, in Harvest, we've actually, in one way or another, been involved directly or indirectly in planting 4 other congregations. Some of them have survived and some have not. In fact, I think it's kind of 50-50 as far as we understand. But I've come to understand also that what happens when Kartatismos occurs is that it isn't necessarily that we as a community will plant, but that new things will spout forth from healed people. So here's a lovely photo, courtesy of Brisbane. This is the Kingdom Makers church plant. I want to go to a church that has rugby league jerseys at the back. That's awesome. And playing guitar is Chris Watseni. Chris turned 40 this week. And Chris and Trish were those who experienced Kartatismos in a way that few others have. This church did such a fabulous job when Nanaki went to be with Jesus of gathering around Chris and Trish and the family. We were mending. We were healing. We were Kartatismos. And guess what? He's now in charge of pastoral care and the worship ministry at the new church plant. And Trish is working for the local Salvation Army church as a social worker. This is what happens when Kartatismos occurs. The sprouting of new life in places that you might not have anticipated or not even seen. And as I thought about it even further as we close here with this verse this morning, from Jeremiah 29, this is the verse that God gave Louise as an encouragement to come and to join with John and Debbie and I in planting Harvest. To seek the peace of the city where I've caused you to be carried away captive, and pray to the Lord for its peace, you will have peace. Here's the thing. Seek the peace of the city where I've caused you to be carried away captive. You see, when Kartatismos occurs, when you have been mended, you go back to the scene of the crime, but this time you are an agent of change. But this time you're an agent of redemption. But this time you bring the healed, transformed, renewed you back to the scene of the crime, back to the place that you thought was so much pain, so much hurt, so much darkness. And I like that. Too often we want to escape our life. We want to escape the things that have caused us pain. But God is saying, no, I just want to mend you up. I want to heal you up so that you can be my witness. You can be my servant. You can be my minister right in the place, right in the same city, right in the same country, right in the same community. That's why it's so important that we be a community of Westies. You see, I find it hard to apply this verse if you leave West Auckland to go and worship in some other part of the city. You're leaving the scene of the crime. This is where you live. This is the place where you were once a captive. So this is the place where your freedom is destined to be of great influence. But a city on a hill, oh, it's got new life bursting forth in all kinds of ways. And yes, I would love to see us plant some more churches. But equally, I would just love to see the Kartatismos have its work, do its work in you and I, that we are so strong and mended and healed that we are ready now to be agents of change.